Mr. President, a gain of function, this is an historic day, the end of gain of function research funding by the federal government and also controls by private corporations on gain of function studies. This was the kind of study that was engaged in by the United States military and intelligence agencies beginning in 1947. By 1969, the CIA said that they had reached nuclear equivalency, that they could kill the entire U.S. population for 29 cents a person. That year, President Nixon went to Fort Detrick and announced a unilateral end to this kind of research, what they call dual-use research, research that was for vaccination and also for military purposes. He then persuaded over 180 countries to sign the Bioweapons Charter in 1973. That basically ended gain-of-function research around the globe until 2002. Until 2001, after the Anthrax attacks.
In the 1990s, and I said that the West really doesn't understand militant Islam. So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
And now, back to our regularly scheduled program.
We passed the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act had a provision, a little-known provision in it, that said that although the Bioweapons Charter is still in effect, and the Geneva Convention is still in effect, U.S. federal officials who violate it cannot be prosecuted. And that relaunched a bioweapons arms race, and that was driven by gain-of-function research. In 2014, 3 of those bugs escaped from U.S. labs, and President Obama declared a moratorium on future use, and instead a lot of that research was moved offshore to the Wuhan lab. We have, and it launched bioweapons arms race all around the country, all around the world, so that China's engaged in it, developing all kinds of weapons using AI and CRISPR technologies that are really devastating. Russia is deeply engaged in it, Iran and many other countries.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
Iran needs to get itself a nuclear weapon as quickly as possible. I have said many times, going to say it again now, whether you like it or not, if I was leading Iran, I would long ago have furnished myself with a nuclear weapon. Given that I'm being threatened daily, sanctioned, strangled, and warned as to the very existence of my state by not one but 2 nuclear-armed states, Israel and the United States of America. So I don't know why Iran doesn't want nuclear weapons. I can't be certain that they still do not want them. I can't be certain that they do not even now have them, given that experts say the state of uranium enrichment in Iran is such that within a few days they could put a nuclear warhead on the tip. What I do know is that if the United States bombs Iran with low-yield nuclear weapons, then World War III is a distinct probability.
Depths of international waters, a current marked by unprecedented military drills, renewed diplomatic overtures, and a blend of technological prowess and strategic positioning. In response to President Donald Trump's recent stern warning to Iran, which underscored the risks of unchecked nuclear advancements, China and Russia have deployed their advanced warships to the region. This decisive action serves as both a counterbalance to U.S. pressures and a demonstration of strategic resolve, reinforcing the shifting dynamics among global powers. In this unfolding saga, three nations, China, Russia, and Iran, are drawing attention with maneuvers that transcend traditional alliances and challenge established power balances.
And we will not have peace until Israel stops its militarization of the entire Middle East. Because the Syrian war is just one of 6 wars that Israel has promoted, including in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. We had the list, actually, from Wesley Clark back in 2001, when he was handed a paper in the Pentagon that the goal was 7 wars in 5 years. The only war that hasn't taken place yet, to Netanyahu's great consternation, is the US war with Iran, which Israel is still trying to instigate to this very day.
Today, a foreign government, Israel, operates the most powerful lobby in Congress. This is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Through control of Congress, Israel demands and gets nearly $5 billion annually. No elected official dares criticize Israel for fear the Jewish lobby will accuse him of anti-Semitism, the kiss of death for any politician. The president also knows what Israel wants, Israel gets. To act otherwise is political suicide. The mass media, founded and controlled primarily by Jews, manipulates the spigot of information out of which heartland America drinks. The message of this contaminated source is, if you criticize Israel, you are anti-Semitic. Be safe, keep your head down, or you are fair game for being knocked off by the Zionist shooting gallery.
As a result, our president and elected officials are slaves to political correctness when it comes to Jews and Israel. They cannot seriously criticize Israel, especially as the source of Mideast strife and terrorism. They cannot suggest an end of aid to Israel. They cannot even protest Zionist control of Congress.
In a world where everything evolved around politically, everything evolved around Israel, and the power was amazing.
Good morning, AIPAC. Good morning.
I will be meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu later today, and President Obama will meet with him tomorrow.
He once called me the first Jewish president. Stand up for Israel and look out for the rights of the Jewish people.
If I could be elected Prime Minister today, if I ever decided to give this up and go over to Israel, I would be elected very quickly. They have polls at 99%.
When Israel is singled out because of anti-Jewish hatred, that is anti-Semitism.
I did not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist, for I am.
We're going to take back our country, and we're going to make Israel great again.
And we're going to make Israel great again.
We need to support Israel. No ands, ifs, or buts.
Have you noticed that the Republicans and the Democrats can't agree on nothing? Except when it comes to Israel, and Netanyahu can come over here, you see the leader of the Republican, the leader of the Democrat standing together with Netanyahu. Is that a strange picture? That you can't agree on the welfare of the American people, but you can agree on what is in the best interest of Israel? Talk back to me.
I mean, sure, you think that you can bully and intimidate people as you always have, but things are different today. This isn't 1991, and it isn't 2001. What a difference 20 years makes. The West is in shambles. Europe is imploding. America is bankrupt. You want to shift from sending all your money to the corrupt and steady losing army of Ukraine to now sending all of your money to the corrupt and steady failing army of Israel, as if your own people don't need that money. I mean, look, America just sent warships over to Israel. Nothing could better show what a failure Israel is, what a failure U.S. policy has been with regards to Israel. I mean, even Ariel Sharon back in the day rightly stated that Israel was supposed to be America's warship in the Middle East, but now you have to send backup. I mean, you've been taken for a ride for decades now. The American people pouring hundreds of billions of dollars to prop up a colonial project for all these years, and it still doesn't work. Netanyahu and his buddies have been eating your money. I mean, do you even know how many corruption charges there are against that man?
The way empires rise is also the way they fall. America rose by colonial settler violence and expansion, and Israel is just a microcosm of that. They rose by belligerence and brutality and genocide, and this is exactly what's bringing them down now. Yes, it is violent. Yes, it is savage. Yes, it is criminal and horrific, and it's incredibly painful. But it's like water draining out from a pool. It moves faster and more violently at the bottom of the vortex until it disappears. What we're seeing now, in my opinion, is the dying spiral of American empire, and Israel is the drain that it's going down.
And now, back to our regularly scheduled program.
It's a kind of weapon that always has blowback. There's always bad news. And the justification for this kind of weaponry was, and these kind of research, was always that we have to do this, develop vaccines to counter a future pandemic. In all of the history of gain-of-function research, we can't point to a single good thing that's come from it. And today I commend President Trump for his courage and his vision in ending U.S. bioweapons research.
What is gain-of-function research? Why do we even care about it? Gain-of-function research modifies a genome or the blueprint in some way that it could potentially enhance function. So if right here I have the genome for bacteria that can fluoresce green or glow green, and it is star-star triangle. If I change that to star-square triangle, and now it's able to glow green and red, that would be a gain-of-function mutation. Now, on the other hand, if I change our original star-star triangle to just star-star, and now it loses function completely and cannot glow green, then that would be a loss-of-function mutation. Now that we get the concept, why is everyone talking about it? So gain-of-function research is a pretty large field and a broad field. The gain-of-function research that people are talking about is a small subset where you are altering pathogenesis or what something can infect. You might be thinking, why the heck would we ever want to edit it? So in the case of vaccines, if there is a virus that only infects humans and we create a vaccine for it, vaccines have to be tested on animals first. So if we need to put the virus in an animal to test the vaccine, we would have to alter the virus in some way, which would be gaining function. Outside of making vaccines, it could be useful for determining what a more pathogenic strain would be, so that way we could prep for it before it naturally occurs in the wild. In tissues that have cancer, we can go back and look to see how their carcinogenic potential changes based on mutations, which helps us when we're looking at individuals with cancer. Society has functioned a lot from gain-of-function research. So we could look at things like human insulin therapy that was developed using E. coli, the dengue fever vaccine that was developed by gain-of-function, enhancing lithium batteries, gain-of-function research, citrus tree greening disease. The treatment for that was developed by gain-of-function research. The Cryptococcus vaccine was developed by gain-of-function research. Solid tumor therapy and our understanding of oncogenes, our ability to kill certain types of tumors, all come from gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research policies have been rapidly developing since at least 2014. There's a lot of, I would say, confusion out there about it, so I just wanted to clear things up. As always, I have my Master's of Science and my Bachelor's of Science. I really just enjoy explaining things to people, and over here are my sources.
So beginning in 2002, Anthony Fauci got a 68% raise from the Pentagon for doing bioweapons development.
Wow.
and he got a raise of billions of dollars a year to do it. And then he started that's when they started doing all this gain of function. And then in 2014, 3 of those bugs escaped. Everybody was angry these bugs escaped, and 300 scientists, top scientists, sent letters to Obama saying, you got to shut down Anthony Fauci because he's going to create a pandemic. And so Obama ordered a moratorium. And at that time, Fauci had 18 different gain-of-function experiments he was doing around the United States. But Obama ordered him to shut them all down, but he didn't. He instead moved his stuff offshore to Wuhan, where he could do it out of sight.
As one of his last acts as president, Biden did pardon Fauci, ostensibly because, as COVID has become an increasingly polarized issue, and Fauci was the public face of lockdowns, mask mandates, and vaccine requirements, Republicans are targeting him. That was Biden's purported rationale for all of these pardons. What if Trump weaponizes the justice system and engages in a witch hunt against political enemies? Now, let's set aside for a moment that is exactly what Trump supporters think that Biden's Justice Department did to Trump. The real question has to be, is there a legitimate reason to think ex-public servant did something wrong, potentially criminal, or worthy of investigating? That should be the standard. In Fauci's case, the answer to that, again, in my view, unequivocally yes. Not because Fauci recommended COVID restrictions that I oppose, not because Fauci, as he admits, made up the social distancing rules, not because Fauci advocated vaccines, any of that. It's not a crime for him to propose COVID mitigation procedures that I think went too far or were wrong-headed. The crime, potentially, is advocating that public tax dollars be spent on reckless scientific experimentation on viruses in unsafe Chinese labs, and then misleading or even lying to Congress about whether he did so.
So the answer is we don't know exactly. One theory is that it was concocted in the U.S. and sent over to Wuhan, to this Wuhan Institute of Virology, for testing in their bat collection, which is the Chinese bats rather than the Egyptian fruit bats. That's plausible. That's one person's theory. There are other theories that even a related research group of German and Dutch may have played a role because they have in Wuhan research. But when the virus broke out in that period at the end of 2019, early 2020, there's commotion among the scientists. What the hell is this? Where'd this come from? Oh my God, did we do this? How'd this escape? Or whatever. Nobody knows, of course. So they start having secret calls. And one of the most important of these calls was on February 1st, 2020, that was then memorialized by one of the participants in a long memo, all of which became public through a Freedom of Information Act subsequently, because our government has lied to us about every single moment of this from the start, hasn't told us anything about any of this. It's all whistleblowers or Freedom of Information Act. That's the only way we know any of what I'm describing to you right now.
Project Veritas has obtained never-before-seen military documents regarding the origins of COVID-19, gain-of-function research, vaccines, potential treatments which have been suppressed, and the government's effort to conceal all of this. Dr. Anthony Fauci has testified many times before Congress stating that the U.S. government was never involved in gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
They gained in lethality. It's a new virus. That's not gain of function?
According to the definition that is currently operable,
we're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
That assertion is based on the NIH's definition of gain of function. However, the documents we've obtained refute that. The documents in question stem from a report at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, better known as DARPA, which were hidden in a top-secret share drive. But what is DARPA? They are an agency under the U.S. Department of Defense, which facilitates research and technology with potential military applications. Project Veritas has obtained a separate report to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, written by the U.S. Marine Corps Major Joseph Murphy, a former DARPA fellow. Major Murphy makes claims in his report to the Inspector General that, if true, could be damning to the official narrative that has been played out to the world over the past 2 years. Major Murphy's report states that EcoHealth Alliance approached DARPA in March 2018, seeking funding to conduct gain-of-function research of bat-borne coronaviruses. DARPA rejected the proposal because the work was too dangerous and could violate the gain-of-function moratorium, despite EcoHealth's position that it would not. According to the documents, the NIAID, under the direction of Dr. Fauci, did not reject the proposal. They went ahead with the research at Wuhan and several sites across the U.S. So here's the question. If the Department of Defense, the same people who make our nuclear arsenal, felt this research was too dangerous to proceed with, why in the world did the NIH, NIAID, and EcoHealth Alliance recklessly disregard the risks involved?
Did NIH fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology through EcoHealth?
It depends on your definition of gain-of-function research. If you're speaking about the generic term, yes, we did, but this is research. The generic term is research that goes on in many, many labs around the country. It is not regulated, and the reason it's not regulated is it poses no threat or harm to anybody.
Each time when I come here, I am abused.
This paper is a fraud. It has not been retracted until today. And it's a fraud.
Where did it run?
It ran in Nature Medicine in March 2020.
Which I think is considered one of the most credible medical journals, right?
When I read it, when it came out, it was, I think, the most cited paper in biology or in medicine by far in 2020. Everyone wanted to know where this virus came from. I read it, and I went around knowingly telling everyone, oh, it's natural. You have to read proximal origins of SARS-CoV-2.
Because it never occurred to you they would lie in Nature Medicine.
Because this is the top of the heap of the scientific journals and the scientific establishment. The top. Nature. You know, there are two great science magazines in the world that have a history that is so deep. One is Science, that's the U.S. one, and the second is Nature, which is the British one. And Nature is the one that originally published Darwin, and it's so illustrious. And I was so smug, oh, you didn't read Nature, SARS-CoV-2, proximal origins, because you believe that stuff when it's written there. It's a fraud, that paper.
And it stands to this day.
To this day, they have not retracted it. There is, last week, a call by several scientists to the editor, a very clever one, calling for its retraction because, this is interesting, all in the weeds, but it's like everything we're talking about. The question is which lab and in which way. It almost surely did not come out of Nature. It almost surely came out of a deliberate research project that had a core idea, which was to take a natural virus and make it more infectious. And we have one major blueprint of that, which is a research proposal called Diffuse, which was submitted to the Department of Defense, to the unit called DARPA in 2018. And it is a kind of cookbook for how to make the virus that causes COVID-19. And the virus is called SARS-CoV-2. And what's distinctive about SARS-CoV-2 is that it has something called a proteolytic cleavage site, and specifically something called a furin cleavage site. And it's just some pieces of the genome that make this thing damn infectious. Yeah. And what's interesting about it is that for this class of bat viruses, which are called beta coronaviruses, which is what SARS comes from and what COVID-19 comes from, for that class of viruses, and there are several hundred known, none of them in nature ever had that particular piece of the genome called... None. Other than SARS-CoV-2.
They call it, or at least certain aspects of it, gain of function. In brief and simple terms, gain of function is the altering of the genetic makeup or the engineering of organisms, diseases, viruses, etc., to make them have new abilities like making viruses multiply or making them more deadly and transmissible, particularly to humans. Now, some people see this as a necessary science, while others see it as reckless to humanity.
What is gain-of-function research of concern? Gain-of-function research of concern is defined as research activities reasonably anticipated to increase a potential pandemic pathogen's transmissibility, pathogenicity, ability to overcome immune response, or ability to overcome a vaccine or drug. Gain-of-function research of concern involves the creation of new health threats that did not exist previously and that might not come to exist by natural means for tens, hundreds, or thousands of years. Gain-of-function research of concern is a small part of biomedical research. It constitutes less than 0.1% of biomedical research and less than 1% of virology. However, because gain-of-function research of concern can cause pandemics, this small part is highly consequential and requires effective oversight. What are the risks? Gain-of-function research of concern poses high, potentially existential risks. Gain-of-function research of concern poses material risks by creating new potential pandemic pathogens. If a resulting new potential pandemic pathogen is released into humans, either by accident or deliberately, this can cause a pandemic. Gain-of-function research of concern also poses information risks by providing information on the construction and properties of new potential pandemic pathogens. Publication of the research provides instructions, step-by-step recipes that can enable a rogue nation, organization, or individual to construct a new pathogen and cause a pandemic. What are the benefits? Gain-of-function research of concern provides limited benefits. Gain-of-function research of concern can advance scientific understanding, but gain-of-function research of concern has no civilian practical applications. In particular, gain-of-function research of concern is not needed for and does not contribute to the development of vaccines and drugs. Companies develop vaccines and drugs against pathogens that exist and circulate in humans, not against pathogens that do not yet exist and do not circulate in humans.
I have a cell that glows green, and I alter the cell so that way it now glows green and red. That is gain-of-function research. But that doesn't really explain why we'd be using it in a vaccine and a virus. So let me tell you. In order for something to make clinical trials, it would first have to be tested on an animal. Well, let's say a virus only infects humans and it doesn't infect animals. We would then have to alter the virus to infect animals, so that way we could try to test the vaccine. Now, this could be an animal like a mouse or a monkey. This is obviously a simplified approach, but you can see how that would be very useful. This is also the same research that brought us insulin, which we produced in E. coli cells. It brought us a treatment for citrus tree greening disease, the dengue fever vaccine. It helps with our understanding of oncogenes, so it's led to a lot of different solid tumor therapies that have been super effective. It's also been used to enhance lithium batteries. So the list goes on, and it does seem scary when it's presented a certain way. Now, you may think that there needs to be different oversight, which is completely fine, but saying that we can't do something entirely does seem to pose an issue for the scientific community and for the protection of people everywhere. It was around 2014 that the first major gain-of-function research regulations came about, and they continue to come about, which is awesome. Our laws develop as our technology develops. But gain-of-function research is very important for virologists and to the overall well-being of humanity. At the end of the day, this is a subset of gain-of-function research, and gain-of-function research is not some big scary monster that is out to get everyone. As always, I have my Master's of Science, my Bachelor's of Science. I really just enjoy explaining things, and over here are my resources.
Gain-of-function would certainly be considered biological weapons research, because why else would you do it?
Yeah.
Keep in mind that the whole ability to isolate genes and insert genes into viruses is a pretty new phenomenon. It's pretty 21st century. I mean, it was being done in the 90s, but not very often and not very well. So it's a real modern phenomenon. So to the extent that the Biological Weapons Convention has been in force for, since the 1970s, how much research on biological weapons is actually going on is unclear. One of the things that you have to look at is political. Like, who in the weapons establishment in your country is an advocate for getting money from the government to do this kind of research? Mm-hmm. And the U.S. pretty much doesn't have people who are interested in this very much. I mean, there are still people theoretically that do research on biological agents in order to prepare against them.
Okay.
So that's the reason why you're still allowed to do research, is because it's considered defensive in terms of developing prophylactics against potential agents that might be used as weapons. So back to sort of anthrax as the ideal weapon, when there are, who knows how many agents there are out there. What we know about them mostly comes from investigating the history of the biological weapons program and the biological weapons programs of other countries. So you have the Soviet Union, who even after the Biological Weapons Convention went into force, worked on smallpox as a biological weapon, which would be horrible because it's very infectious. And if you were born after, maybe sometime in the 1980s, you haven't had a smallpox vaccine.